Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Welcome back to Flushing It Out. Susan McCorkindale, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Samantha. It's great to be back with you.
Returning guest, amazing woman.
More to flush, baby. More to flush.
There's always enough stuff to flush out when Jersey girls get together. So now if you're a first-time listener of Susan, she is a mom, author, speaker, an autism advocate, a forever Jersey girl, occasional overthinker, but not too frequently, and more often a bubblegum machine mouth type. And like everyone else is tired of COVID. And she says fat from COVID, but I'm not going to go there.
Definitely.
Feeling lost because of COVID. And I love her. I love her honesty, her vulnerability, and her authenticity. So thank you, Susan.
Oh, thanks, Samantha. I'm glad to be here. I just, when you had us, you always have us fill out that form before we start the show. And I'm like, one of the questions was like, what do you really want to talk about? I'm like, I really want to talk about how much weight. I want to know how much weight other people have gained and what are they doing to hide it? You know what I mean? Because I just feel caught. I feel like I can't hide.
It's, that's pretty much the story of my COVID life. And, I was thinking when you wrote that, I was like, you know what? I think everyone's sick of COVID and everyone's sick of talking about it. So there's a part of me that says like, oh no, let's just stay in this place where we talk about something, I don't know, off the wall. But I think first addressing, if we're going to be talking about, you are all about flaws are the new black, celebrating your flaws. And I'm all about celebrating the failures I also am starting to say perceived failures because what we think are failures are not always failures.
No, they're not failures.
And I think
not always. That's
exactly.
Right.
And you think about it, everyone's coming out. Well, we're still not out of the season yet, but like you said, you had this laundry list of all these thoughts and I would say criticisms of yourself when we're all just getting by. So I think if we can kind of say, all right, let's just lay it out on the table. What are we struggling with? And how, more importantly, what are we learning through that? Because let's combat that shame. Like, okay, what are the things we think are our flaws? We think are our failures, but then really let's shift the perspective because I had a big perspective shift with weight. And so that's why when you wrote that, I said, okay, so I'm going to say it right now. So everyone doesn't have to listen to the end for my big aha moment. But I've been following some different body positivity nutritionists on Instagram and stuff that speak to different people, and they're not part of the normal diet culture. And something that caught my eye was that emotional eating is, I can't remember what it was, but it's like, that's a coping technique and there's nothing wrong with it. Like,
what about emotional drinking? Just kidding.
Well, there's a certain level, but exactly. But I actually was talking to someone that even that, like, there's a window where of course it's not okay to overindulge to the point where we harm ourselves. Right. But it's like, I can't remember how it was. But it's like this cushion where if that's what helps you, and I know for me, 2020 was a very hard year. And it was like, I was holding it together in all these other areas where I had to.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like that emotional eating. It's like, I needed that endorphin, serotonin, whatever, dopamine hit. And and it's like, now that I'm kind of coming out of it, I'm giving myself so much more grace.
Yeah. Well, you have to forgive yourself. You needed it when you needed it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Good.
Good. You look terrific.
Thank you.
Can't get over your thin face. I'm thrilled for you.
I think it's the Zoom auto appearance, but I'll take it.
You know what? I'm thinking that I like it. I hope it's working on my end. Don't be looking at the wrinkles.
I know.
I think you look great. 2020's been awful.
It's been a year.
Absolutely. It's been terrible.
Now, so your flaws are the new black. You're always about shifting the perspective as well on celebrating those flaws.
Right. Yes, of course. Because celebrating them, and my whole thing about wearing them, flaws of the new black, like we wear black, we like black makes us feel good. So it's like, it's putting it out there. It's like, wear your flaws. Don't be so concerned about them because so many times, they are our strengths, but we've been told, you got a big mouth or you say whatever comes out of your mouth or you're not good at this or what have you. And so many times, I have a big mouth, and whatever comes right out of my mouth. Well, sometimes, that really works for me when I'm writing something. And it really works for me when I know what I really need to say to help a friend or, help one of my boys. Like I learned to be careful and temper it, but let it out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a flaw, but not a bad, terrible one, and I think we should recognize that.
And it's a flaw according to who?
Well, the people pleaser.
Yeah, the people pleaser in us. We've been doing this, my husband and I have been doing this positive intelligence kind of course. And it talks about how it kind of is that whole idea of our strengths are kind of what also then hold us back. Because if at an early age you talked about being like a talker, and I was a chatter too. And, it's the thing that you kind of learn to temper it because it gets a lot of slack. So I remember one time a woman who had only seen me once, maybe a couple times in my whole life, because it was just when I was visiting my grandparents. And she said, she saw me when I was older and she said to my mom, "You were always a mouthy kid." And I told my mom just actually recently that I said, what's really important about that memory for me? It's not that she told me that, because I did start to feel like, oh, I'm a mouthy kid. But the more important thing was how my mom reacted to it.
Oh, I was dying for you to say about your mom. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What'd she do?
And she just, I think she was pleasant at the time. Just, okay, just get out, I'm not going to have a conversation. But afterwards, I remember I don't know what she's talking about. And that was, just basically totally dismissing it. And I said, man, now that I'm older and I have perspective, it's I think if she would have been more well, you are, or this or that, that would have been an area where then I became insecure of using my voice. And I just feel like that simple brush off, oh, okay, well, it's not a bad thing that I'm a mouthy kid. If that's what she thought, that's what she thought, but that's not a bad thing for me. So
apparently you had some self-confidence and you said whatever was on your mind. And she took it as you being a mouthy kid, and that's her opinion.
And that's the struggle with raising kids.
Wrong with being a mouthy kid.
That's what I said. I'd rather have my kids be mouthy and say stuff than learn to stuff it in.
Suck it down. That's awful. No sucking down.
Tell me about COVID. How has COVID been?
COVID. Lucky, right? Lucky, employed.
Very lucky. Yep.
Loving boyfriend, employed, healthy children, healthy parents. That's all good. But, so I'm reluctant to say anything negative because I know how good we have it.
Yeah.
But my stomach has been off the charts bad for months and months. And I've been to doctors, regular doctors, holistic doctors, therapists, everything. I take everything. I do everything. And one day recently, I had my, COVID crack up, as I like to call it. I was trying to do something one morning for me and for Robert, and I couldn't do it. And I completely flipped out and I ran down the stairs. I was crying. I slammed my phone on the table. I was like, I can't take it anymore. I'm out. So I lost my mind. And I think the good thing about that is that prior to that, I was so worked up and I was in so much discomfort that if I spoke to my mom, I really couldn't hear what she had to say. Same thing with my sister-in-law, same thing with my best friend. And I wasn't listening. I couldn't listen. So when I kind of snapped that day, it took me to a whole different level. So that day I called my mom and she's saying, well, how many tests have you had? I'm like, I don't know, 6 tests so far. Well, how many more can they do? I said, I think there's 3 more they can do. She goes, okay, Susan. So after those 3, when you're fine, then what? I said, well, then I'm going to have to deal with the angry voices in my head. And she was like, yes, you're so stressed out. Your brain is doing this to your stomach. The next day, I had a very similar conversation over lunch with masks, socially distanced, outdoors with my sister-in-law. And the day after that, I went down to see my friend Melissa White. She just had a fantastic exhibit at Elevate Culpeper. And I love her. She's one of the most intuitive and creative and in touch people I've ever met in my entire life. And she's been following me on Instagram, occasionally moaning and groaning about my belly. So she starts talking to me. And before I know it, I'm going to get in here and get this. Now I'm going to whip out my quartz. Now the quartz is with me. I carry my quartz. She charged it for me. I have I think it's either rose or lavender or whatever. I put it on my wrist, and I even put it behind my ear over here because I've also developed TMJ, the way your jaw locks and everything, and the whole thing swells. And I'm like, oh, look, more manifestation of Susan's stress. So I keep this tucked into my bra, I have not had a stomach ache in a week. Today's a week.
I'm so glad to hear that.
I think that COVID did whatever it did, and I had to finally hit bottom. I could climb out.
Yes. And of course, I don't love that happened, but I love that you said you had the COVID crackdown. And I was thinking, I've been writing a lot, crack up. Yeah. And because I've been talking a lot, just for me with 2020, it's been a lot of brokenness, hurt, things like that. But the flip side of that and the perspective shift is that's when the healing can happen, is when you kind of crack. And there was a quote,
that's when the light gets through.
That's when the light gets through.
And things start to make sense and you start to feel better. And
exactly. And I was thinking about when you talked about the phone calls and hearing. And I think so often we are protecting, there's parts of ourselves that we're protecting. And so if you're trying so hard to keep it together, to not crack up and to do that, so that when people are speaking to you, can't hear it. And when you finally just release it and let it go and let those cracks, happen, that's when that light can get in. So, and I think like you even started out in the, I'm so glad you said it to bring attention to it. You said, I know things are so bad for others. I'm so lucky. So I don't even want to share this.
Right. Yeah.
And that's everybody, right?
Of course. Yes. Yes. Everyone who's not super suffering. And there are so many super suffering individuals
for sure.
in this country. So everybody who's not super suffering is reluctant to say, I really don't feel good. And I think sometimes I'm going to go right out there and jump right off that little ledge outside my office here. Because how can you complain like that?
Yeah.
Your parents are good. You didn't lose your brother. You didn't lose your spouse. You were not sick in the hospital.
Yeah.
So you feel awkward. You feel ungrateful to say, I don't feel great. But I think that we all do that. We preface it just the way I prefaced it.
Yeah.
And then having said that, it's like, oh, thank God, because now I'm talking to a friend I can trust. And I got to let this out.
Yeah.
She knows, my friend knows I am not a bad person. And I can actually talk with her. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Susan, for anyone listening, she's this author of 2 best-selling books. And so 500 Acres and Nowhere to Hide, right?
Actually, that's the 500 Acres and actually the first one is Confessions of a Counterfeit Farm Girl. And the second one is 500 Acres and No Place to Hide, More Confessions of a Counterfeit Farm Girl.
More confessions.
More confessions. There's always so much to confess to, Samantha.
So much. And
my favorite thing to do.
I know, me too. I have to get it out. Like that's for me. Like in 2020 has been a year for me too, that the more I keep stuff in, the more and when I let it out, when I have that release, so much better.
Absolutely. Yes.
So your TED Talk, so the books and then the TED Talk, you talked about grief and making peace with your grief.
Yes.
And I was just thinking while you were talking how you said something, and I can't remember what it was on the first podcast, I feel like, or just in our conversation, but how our grief is not, it can be different, but it's still painful. Like, so we don't compare our grief.
Right.
And I was thinking, isn't that,
grief is subjective. It's personal.
Yeah. And that's the same thing now. Like that's what's going on right now. Like,
you're absolutely right.
Isn't it funny though, how if it's like in one lane of our life, we kind of get it. Like, okay, if it's this, so I feel like it's a little bit of a shift, but for me, it's giving empathy and grace to others. I feel like that's a strength of mine. I'm empathetic. I'm loving, forgiving, graceful. The person I'm the worst to
is yourself.
Is myself.
Of course.
And so I thought for you, you've been through a very hard season of grief, and you've shared such encouraging words, about making peace and it becoming with you. And so I wonder if that voice needs to be told to people now as we are in this really hard season that so many people feel like shouldn't be that hard because I'm not here or, I haven't had this happen. And it's just, there's this weird anxiety that people are feeling. So
we need to be kinder to ourselves in general, always. So many people now, it's like, well, I haven't heard the expression of late, but when this all started, it was uncertain times. And I was like, when has anything been certain? The only certainty I have right now is I'm sitting here talking to you. Once we get done with this, I can go downstairs and that could be, I have no idea what's going to happen. There is no certainty. And I think we all just have to be, aware of the suffering of others and mindful of them and pray for them, and aware of also that, our stuff does count.
Amen.
We're allowed to say, I'm really having a bad time.
Yep.
We don't have to, I get like embarrassed by it. Like I shouldn't say anything. But I come from a long line of women who do that. So I'm not the first, our stuff does matter. And our friends do want us to talk with them, because also then we get it out and then they can do the same. We give them permission to let their stuff out, and nobody should be walking around all bottled up. It's just going to make you sick. If you're not already sick, you're going to be sick.
Amen. It's a picture. I'll have to post it sometime. It's a great description of when you're going through, or especially if you know someone who's going through a hard time. And I feel like even now it's a great example. It's a circle, and it shows, the person at the center of kind of the problem or the trauma or the issue. And it says, it's like an arrow going out and arrows going in. And it basically says, if you need to vent, you're not going to necessarily vent to the person who's having the trauma. I don't want to say bigger than yours, but if someone's struggling, like with like in COVID, using COVID right now, someone has a family member, you go
You're not gonna
outside.
go to that person.
No, that's who you pour into. But that doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid with the stress you're feeling. You just go to the person, either in the same circle as you or one outside and kind of one removed from it. I'll have to get a better analogy.
No, you have it right. You have it right. That would be awful to go to that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And dump on them. That would be unthinking. It would be like, if you were that person, you'd be like, are you really calling me with this? Do you have any idea what my life is like? You would be a little put off. Yeah. So, of course, you have to bear that in mind. You have to go to the people who you can. And like I said, pray for the people who are suffering. So many people.
Definitely.
And we're grieving in our own way. All of us are grieving, and that's real. That's a real thing.
Grief of losing control.
I think it's grief of, losing. Well, there's no control.
Exactly.
I firmly believe there is absolutely no control.
What I meant to say, and I'm glad you said that, it's not the losing control. It's the grief of the thought that you ever had control.
That's okay. But it's also the grief of in all your plans for your business in 2020, anyone's plans, or your plans to go watch your kids play sports, your plans to go and, be there for their graduation and moving them in only to have to move them right back out again at college, or your plans to get married and have a huge wedding and, all the plans. Everything, the plan to leave the house and go to the supermarket, run there and back, and who needs a mask? Nope, you need a mask. Yep. All of it is, and you can't, we're doing this way. Last time we did this, we were sitting in the same room right next to each other. So it's all those little things that they eat at you, and they're not big. You can deal with them, but you know what? They're still eating at us.
Mm-hmm.
And they're zipping away and nipping away like termites at the foundation of a house. And it starts to make these big holes and cracks. And, if we're not, we don't cut ourselves some slack and acknowledge that, I'm feeling really lousy. I really miss you. I can't believe I haven't seen you, and I shouldn't see you for the safety of our respective, tribes and bubbles and units, You have to be able to say, this is terrible. This really is awful. It's so unnatural, to not be able to right now, if I did see you in the supermarket, I couldn't hug you. It's terrible. Especially for people who are huggers. It's really bad. It's been a terrible year period for everybody, and we're grieving. I didn't see Kyla play rugby once this year. We used to do so much traveling. Have laptop, we'll travel,
Mm-hmm.
I can't complain. I shouldn't complain. So many people don't get to travel. So many kids, they don't get to play sports, whatever. But I miss seeing Kai and his team on the rugby pitch. I really do. They're beautiful. They're brilliant. And all of us have that type of stuff right now that we've missed. And so we grieve it.
Yep. I think acknowledging our grief is so important and so powerful. So how can we move towards making peace with our grief? So looking at your wise words, your wisdom, I love that the crack up. I think that the crack up is totally not only valid, but I think needed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
I feel so much better.
Yep.
In terms of making peace with our grief, it's when I, described that, I remember just, sitting with it, and as uncomfortable as that made me, I thought of everything, that I let all my thoughts come into my head, is how I should say it. I didn't push them and say, that's too painful, or I don't want to think about that. So I guess in this instance, everything I just said to you is stuff I think about. Mm-hmm. Like, I haven't seen Kai play. I haven't seen his teammates. My Casey had a great job for a while up at Outback Steakhouse. I couldn't go. I couldn't put myself in a position. He was masked and everything. I couldn't go see my boy at work in his new job. You know what I mean? So those things are the things that I would suggest in your own personal life. Those are the things you think about. And you just got to say to yourself, you know what? There's nothing I can do to fix that. Those are little pains. They're pains. Those little pains can stay right here and be part of me. And you move forward with your little pains. But those little, and even big, I haven't seen my parents in ages. Those things make you more grateful. They make us grateful, period. For when that starts to change and you can go to the rugby game. You can run up to New Jersey and hug your parents, like I want to go see my parents. It makes you more grateful then for finally being able to do that. So that I would keep all that stuff in your heart. You don't want to push that away. It's who you are. That's the last year of our lives. Why would we flush that?
Yeah. Don't flush that out.
Flush that out, babe. Don't flush that down the drain.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I mean. That's your life. So allow it to make you appreciative and grateful for the things that are coming. And I don't think you should be foolishly positive or optimistic in any sort of like a silly way, but I believe in being optimistic. I believe in the power and the goodness of human beings. I believe in their brains. I believe these vaccines are going to work. I believe that someday, we will all be able to see each other at Molly's or Claire's or something and be able to hug and say hello. And I believe that. I believe that those people out there who've been working so hard, they're that smart. That's going to happen, And
I agree.
I have to be optimistic. And when I finally get to go to Claire's again and be with Robert and see you and maybe Jeremy, I'm going to be that much more grateful.
Yeah.
For the chance to just be out, be healthy.
Yep.
Holding that glass of Chardonnay, babe, and relaxing.
Yep. Kicking back. That's the thing. I think in the hard times, what I have found in 2020 is that it's through the hardest times, the darkest hours, that's where the gratitude can grow. That's where that seed can be
and you
planted.
Need it. You need it. You need to act on it as soon as humanly possible. I was so grateful for my mom that day, for my sister-in-law, and seeing Melissa. Mm-hmm. I was immediately feeling better.
Now, I would say with the 20 years ago Jersey girl, would have she thought that a crystal in her bra would be part of her healing regimen?
No, I don't think my 20 years ago self would have thought anything of the kind. I think that Aquanet was probably my healing ritual.
The fumes, just a nice inhale, exhale.
I don't think I got in any way spiritual until I was in my 40s.
Mm. And that's you had some real life happen.
Real life was happening. Mm-hmm. And I've always had faith But I got like big faith out of the whole thing. And I can't say that I'm a church goer because some don't really particularly do that. But I have lots of faith in lots of things, like, God and the universe and the little crystal in my bra, right? That started in my 40s. I mean, it probably started before Stewie got sick. Yeah. But I just started to realize how tough it was to be a mom. Yeah. And that my mom not always wrong.
Nope. Maybe get a lot wiser as we get older, right?
My mother is officially the smartest person I've ever met on the planet. She may be the smartest person in the universe.
That's great. Well, that's why I asked. I said, I love the, I think changing and growing is good. And I think being open to, we don't know where our healing is going to come from, right?
That's right.
And so that's so I'm so grateful for all the guests because you don't know where and what doors are going to open or windows. And I just think that's really neat and to not shut that off, So
what I always feel bad about is people who walk around with all that shut off. They're just shut off to it. And I'm like, I walk around like, bring it on. I can wind up going to, I don't know, like a meeting or a group to do some sort of volunteering and hooking up with the quirkiest person. I want to hang out with that person because bring it. I want to see what's going on. And I want to know about you. And why do you believe that? And I like that. I'll go home and do some reading. That might be good for me.
Yep. That could be a new thought.
And I feel badly for people who aren't open like that. You're missing out.
Well, that's why that's the whole thing. There's opportunity in the hard times. There's opportunity and it sucks and it's hard and it sounds really pretty and flowery language. I feel like when I write stuff, like on Instagram, it's like, oh, there's beauty in pain and everything. That's like how that's like how I write it. 'Cause that's like, I think the English major in me coming out. But the real thing is it freaking sucks, but now that I'm on the other side of it, it's like, oh crap, there really is beauty in pain.
Sure.
There really is good that can come from really bad
stuff. Comes from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the more we put that out there.
Yep. And if you don't keep growing, you start dying.
That's so true. Yeah. Susan, I always appreciate your words. And I know we talked a lot about, kind of I pulled on a lot of the older things you've talked about, but they're universal. Yeah. But what is something new that you're thinking? What's the new voice of Susan McCorkindale in 2021? What is the new voice coming?
My new voice, I'm hoping that I will finally get a book deal in 2021. I have an agent who really likes Bounce. And wants to represent me. So I'm very excited because I think Bounce is absolutely timely. I think that it's a book people need to read now. I would say women because that's the majority of my audience, but I think anybody could pick up Bounce. The whole title is Bounce, a memoir of resilience in uncertain times, and benefit from it because it's part memoir, part self-help. So throughout the book, there are these little bounce boosts where I just basically speak to you. I'm like, look, here's how I did that. And this man read it. He was like, I love how you did this. I love your voice. So I'm hoping that in 2021, I can go back to calling myself an author with some pride.
Oh, you should have pride all the time because I think your voice is so important. And I am excited to see how it is going to be used in 2021 because.
Thanks, Samantha. Me, you too.
Well, it's that resiliency and that, I think that's the thing. That's the secret. You know what I mean? It's not that we don't get knocked down. It's not that the hard times. I mean, I kind of thought like, okay, one and done. I've had this really horrible year. I've had this really hard stuff. I've grown. I've figured it out. And
you're done now.
I'm done now. And
sorry to laugh at you.
No, I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing at myself.
God. That would actually be awful. You would be so bored and you would be so miserable. Yeah. That would be awful.
Because as soon as we think we have it figured out, that's when
God laughs at us.
And I loved your post on Instagram the other day. You said you shared the bird about I couldn't afford therapy, so I started the podcast. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty accurate for me.
And I'm a frequent guest, so you can tell how I'm getting my therapy.
Yep, this is it. But that's the thing. I feel like with my faith, like I feel like God has called us to be in community with each other. I mean, there's quotes that
Agreed.
are there. It's like, we are meant to carry this burden of life together. And Rebecca Bertram talked about, when we share our joys, it grows them exponentially.
Right,
and when we share our burdens, it lightens them for us.
That's right. It alleviates them. That's right.
I mean, I can look at podcast episodes, but lighten them for sure. And it's like, I can pinpoint podcast guests and stories told, whether on the podcast or off, that helped carry me through 2020. So
that's good. That's so good.
Like if selfishly, if anyone else gets anything out of this, like, I hope that happens. But selfishly, I'm like, this has carried me. I see now, like, whoa, I thought this was for others and it was for me.
Right. That's right. Isn't that crazy? And you're whispering.
I know.
It's okay that it's for you.
Yeah. So I know that your voice, your vulnerability, your authenticity, your willingness to be you there needs to be more of that. So.
Oh, well, I've got plenty, plenty to go around. I just, me, I can't help myself.
Yeah.
I say what I say. I write what I write. And my feeling is there's somebody else out there, I know it, who feels exactly the same way and is dying to find out that they're not alone.
Exactly.
My job on this planet is to make sure that they know they're not alone. And, send me an email. We can chat, and you're not by yourself.
It's so true. And I think that, you and I, we have similar, but we're different stages of life and whatnot. And I think that that's even more important, though, why all the voices need to be heard, because if it's just one voice in one season, and so it just, so for people listening, it's like, it's just your feelings matter, your experience matters, and
that's right.
Not to stuff it down. So to not qualify the feelings. Earlier you talked about that. It's what came to mind was, we should not qualify our feelings. Yeah. I shouldn't feel this because just feel the feelings, let it be a part of us. So
yeah.
And bounce back. Bounce back.
Well, and bounce forward.
Bounce forward. Ooh, I like, that's so much better. Bounce forward. Yes.
Yeah. Because, you can do that. You might get knocked down a peg again, but that's okay because you've been building that muscle, that resilience, and you'll bounce back. You'll bounce forward. You'll keep going. You'll be unstoppable.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Samantha. It was great to see you. I nearly just called you Sam.
Oh,
it was lovely to see you, baby.
Samantha, love it all. So if, people to find you, where can they find you?
They can find me at SusanMcCorkindale.com. And they can find me on Facebook, Susan McCorkindale author. And on Instagram, I have Susan McCorkindale on Instagram. So that would be fun. Find me there.
Yay. I can't wait
Thanks for having me.
to read Bounce when it comes out, because I know it's going to do big things.
Cross your fingers. Ask God to take care of it.
All of it. It all will be the way, all for good. That's my thing, is it's all for good. No matter how it unfolds, it's all for good. So, thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Samantha, for having me on. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. Please visit our website at flushingitout.com for all things Flushing. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.